everybody, it's Mrs. Clemens.
And Mr. Marshall.
And this is U.S. History Flipped. And we are again reviewing for test number 1. This is part 2 of our 2-part review series for our first test. And
we're going to start off with constitutional structure. Oh yeah, the structure of the Constitution. So what are the structural differences between the Articles of Confederation, our first government that didn't work all that well, and our awesome government, the Constitution? So as you can see right there, our first government only had one branch, only had a legislative. And then we were like, wow, this doesn't really work. So let's make the Constitution with 3 branches that all do different things and are all have checked and balanced and all good. Next one we have the duties of those 3 different branches that we created.
you said duty.
Really?
That's right.
That's right. One of the duties of the legislative branch is to make the laws. All right? Next, we have the executive who's enforcing, the FBI and CIA and NSA and all those other good, funny places. And the judicial branch, who interpret, because, you make a law and you're not quite sure what it means, but it's already made, and you need to interpret it. How does it fit in these specific circumstances? Those judges, those old guys in wigs and robes, are the ones that are going to figure it out. Well, they don't wear wigs anymore, but they do still wear robes. And next, why today can presidents only serve 2 terms? And today is the key. Right? Originally, it was part of the unwritten Constitution. We just did it because we did. And today, we can only serve, or the president can only serve 2 terms because an amendment was made. Right? It was made after FDR. Next, we have what are the powers of the House of Reps and the Senate? Right? So the House of Representatives, even though it's considered the lower house, it's still really, really important. Right? So they're the ones that have to start any bill that has to deal with money. That's why this whole government shutdown thing, the bill to end the government shutdown and get the budget going had to start in the House. Right? They're the ones that choose the president. If there's a tie in the Electoral College, it has to go to them because they're closer to the people, because they're elected every 2 years. Right? And they're the ones that start the impeachment process. They're not the jury. They don't decide if they're guilty or not. They just start it up. And then the Senate, they're considered the upper house. They do the trial. They actually vote, whether or not they actually get kicked out of office. They choose the VP in a tie for the Electoral College. They approve the presidential appointments. So the president's like, I like this guy. And they can either say yes or no. And they ratify the treaties. The president negotiates them, and these guys say yes or no, depending. All right, and here we have our first multiple choice question. Which action best illustrates the system of checks and balances in the United States government? A. Congress overrides a veto by the president. B. The House and Senate pass different versions of a bill.
You're very excited.
C. The Supreme Court reverses an earlier decision. Or D. The president fires. Bang. Not kill, just fire. A member of the cabinet. Now, we're talking about checks and balances, balancing out the government. Right? So it's A, Congress overrides a veto by the president. Right? Because the president's trying to veto and stop the bill, and Congress is like, no. We're going to override that veto and keep it going. So the answer is A. Now, the reason that the others are wrong, right? The House and Senate passing different versions of a bill is just them being confused and not sure what to agree on, which does happen a lot, but it's not a part of checks and balances. C, the Supreme Court reverses an earlier decision. That just shows the changing times. That's not them checking a different branch and balancing things out. And the president firing a member of the cabinet, it's his cabinet. That's not, again, it's not dealing with another branch. Right? And moving on, we have...
All right, some general Constitution goodness. Aww. Describe the unwritten Constitution and give examples. All right, so the unwritten Constitution is items or are items that they're not actually specifically in the Constitution, but we've held on to them due to tradition. Some of these have been here since the very beginning. Political parties, basically since the beginning. Presidential cabinet. Washington had the first cabinet. Having the 2-term presidency, exactly like what Mr. Marshall was talking about. Washington, he served 2 terms, he went home and died. The next guy that was elected to 2 terms did it, then went home and died, and they just kind of kept doing that. Remember, today, it's an amendment. And then judicial review, that's also something that is not actually written in the Constitution. It's something that was established actually through a court case that we'll talk about later. What's the purpose of the census? You need to count up the population so that you can know how many people each state has, so you know how many representatives each state should have in the House of Reps. So you're going to do that every 10 years. Why are checks and balances included in the Constitution? They're to prevent one branch from overpowering the other two branches. So that's why they're there. And then let's talk about some of these. Legislative branch, they have the power to impeach. They have the power to approve presidential appointments. They can ratify treaties, and they can override presidential vetoes. The executive branch can issue executive orders. They can make appointments like judges or cabinet members or ambassadors, to name a few. And they can veto bills from Congress. And then the judicial branch, they only have one, but it's a really powerful one. They have judicial review, which is the ability to decide whether or not laws are constitutional.
And now we got federalism, right? Remember, federalism, the definition, this is where we take different levels of government, okay? We divide power between the state government and the national governments, right? And the reason we have this is because it's a way of balancing everything out, okay? We spread the power around, and that way one area, one person doesn't have too much power and mess everything up, right? So that's federalism, and so far it's worked out pretty well.
Yay.
Yay. And now we have a whole slew of different kind of powers, okay? We're going to start off with delegated. Now, delegated, only the federal government, only the national government. You know, these are the guys that make the money. These are the guys that declare war, because, you know, if we're going to go to war, we have to go to war with everybody together. We can only have one kind of money. It's just the only part that makes any kind of sense, right? The next type of power we have is the reserve powers. These are only the states, right? So that's why every state has different marriage laws. That's why every state has, you know, different ways of doing elections, whether it's, you know, poking holes in pieces of paper or touching touchscreens, you know, licensing professionals. Everybody kind of does it in their own way. Right? And then concurrent powers, which is like the sharing. We all like powers, you know, the states and the national, yeah. It's like, you know, they just hug, and then they go ahead and they make taxes together. And they make laws, and they enforce laws, and all these different things. Right? And that's something that they can both do. And then we have the implied powers. And remember, implied powers, necessary and proper clause, elastic clause, all the same thing basically, okay? That you can stretch the Constitution, that you can do what's necessary and proper to provide for the welfare of the people, to do what you need to do. Right? And then you have the denied powers, where you cannot make a law ex post facto, and then, you know, I can't make a law today and then say you broke it yesterday, now you're in trouble. You can't take away, you can't suspend habeas corpus, which is the right to a speedy trial, and there's no titles of nobility at all. All right, so the next multiple choice question we have. So the fact that the United States Constitution provided for federalism and a system of checks and balances suggests that A, the original 13 states sought to dominate the national government. B, its writers desired the national government to rule over the states. C, its writers feared a concentration of political power. Or D, the American people of that time supported a military government. So remember, we're talking system of checks and balances. We want to spread the power around, right? So the right answer is going to be C. They feared that concentration of power. They wanted everybody to be able to check each other and keep everything balanced, right? Now, we know that it can't be A, because the original 13 states sought to dominate the national government. It didn't work out. You know, the states can't have the power.
That was the articles.
Yeah.
It didn't work.
Exactly. B, the writers desired the national government to rule over the states. No, it's not like they just want this all-powerful thing. You know, they want it to be balanced. You know, that's why they made checks and balances. And then D, the American people of that time supported a military government. Yeah, they definitely didn't. We didn't want to be controlled by our own military. That doesn't even make sense.
No way, Jose. All right, our next one is one of these dreaded speaker ones. So here's what you need to do. You need to read, base your answer on the following question, on these statements, and on your knowledge of social studies. Then the next thing you read is the question that comes right before the multiple choice. Which statement best represents the ideas of federalism? So now you're thinking federalism. So here's how I do it. I say, statement A, each person must be able to voice his or her concerns on all issues that involve this new nation and bear the responsibility for the decisions made. Well, they're talking about voicing decisions, voicing concerns. That sounds like a freedom of speech thing to me. So I'm thinking that's probably not A. Speaker B, or statement B, the power of this new nation must rest in a strong, stable group that makes important decisions with the approval, but not the participation of all. Well, I don't know that that's the division of power between state and national government. That's, I don't know what's going on there. I'll hold on to that one. Statement C, there must be several governments within one nation to ensure adequate voice and responsibility to all. Well, hang on, we do have several governments. We've got a national government, we've got a state government, we've got a county government, we've got a city government. Maybe, I don't know. Statement D, individuals must not allow their freedoms to be swallowed by an all-powerful government. Well, I would, if I were narrowing this down, I would go down between C and D because they don't want their freedoms to be swallowed. But this really, right here, is talking about the Bill of Rights. The answer is C, that to have the several governments, because remember, federalism is the division of power between the state and national governments. So we're dividing power in that way. This really is freedom of speech. This really is just something totally different, and this is the answer. I like my explanation of that. 30, more constitutional goodness. What are some of the ways that the Constitution can be adapted and changed to meet society's needs? So we've got the elastic clause, which is also known as the necessary and proper clause, which is also known as implied powers. So yeah, they can stretch the meaning of the Constitution. Amendments can actually change the Constitution, and judicial review, they're deciding if things are constitutional or not. So that's certainly adapting and changing. What's the Electoral College? What would have to be done to change it or to stop using it? The Electoral College is what we use to elect the president. So no, the president is not directly elected by the people. And because it's in the Constitution, anything that's actually in the Constitution, the only way to get rid of it, you can't make a law, it won't do it. You'd have to make an amendment to the Constitution. You'd have to actually change the Constitution. Define the term judicial review. Well, I think we've defined it about 20 times so far in this PowerPoint, so I wrote it shorter, but with bigger words. The ability of the courts to determine the constitutionality of laws, basically whether or not laws are constitutional. 33, why are the courts considered to be the least likely to be influenced by the whims of the public? And I put that in quotes because that's something that you'll actually see as a question, whims of the public. At the national level, so it's different on different levels, right? Other levels, judges are elected. You might see their signs all over the place. But at the national level, judges are appointed, meaning that they don't have to run for election. They don't have to make any promises like, oh, vote for me and I'll do this. And they serve a life term, so they're going to be there forever. So yeah, they just, it's not as important to them what the public is thinking about certain things. Why is the House of Reps considered to be closest to the people? There's a couple of reasons why. First off, they have a 2-year term, so every 2 years they're running for re-election. Next, their numbers based on population, so there are more representatives for the people. Originally, they were the only part of the national government that's directly elected by the people, because the Senate was elected by the state legislatures, and the president was elected and still is elected by the Electoral College, and the judges aren't elected. And Mr. Marshall, would you like to do this one?
So under the provisions of the original United States Constitution, the most democratically selected body was so we got Senate, Cabinet, Supreme Court, or House of Representatives. Right? So democratically elected is where everybody gets to vote, which is completely D, House of Representatives. Right? The Supreme Court is not elected at all. They're appointed. The Cabinet, again, appointed. And originally, the Senate wasn't elected by us. That was chosen by the state legislatures. So we got to make sure that we read that original in the United States, because originally only the House of Representatives was voted on by us. Right? And then this is our last multiple choice question, and and then this particular one, the answer you're going to find is D once you read through it. And this is the end of this PowerPoint, so I hope you guys are doing some studying on your own, and thanks for watching.
Bye.